Om Jnana-timirandhasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshuranmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Better sit on the mat. You're also sitting on the mat? In Shastra it's stated that one should sit on an asana for any auspicious activity. And one reason for that is that the stone floor is actually very bad for health to sit on it for a protracted period. Anyway, let's continue with the reply to the various points of the Reverend, whoever he may be. So, we are informed by this person. Oh, what does he say? I'm not here to hurt your feelings. If I did by any chance... Oh, we read this already. We read up to here. If you're not going to get angry, let me point out a few things with all humbleness. Why not get angry? There's some idea they should never get angry. But if someone is making so many lies, and he may not even know they're lies. He may have been taught that this is actually a fact, all the things that he's speaking. Just like the whole of society is one big lie. The whole of so-called civilization is just one big lie. It's based on the idea that we just work and enjoy get money and enjoy yourself, but no one enjoys anything, and janma mrityu jara vyadhi, everyone suffers birth, death, old age and disease. So, but everyone thinks, work, get money, you'll be happy. Is it a fact? You're from a so-called rich family. Not very rich, but rich enough to be known as rich. Has it brought you happiness? Alfred Brush Ford, known better in the Hare Krishna movement as Ambarish Das, was born into actually one of the world's most famous families, the Ford Motor Car Company. So he's an heir to the Ford Motor Car Company. And he said, I think he told me personally, I'm sure he said it several times, that what he gained from being born in a rich family, I mean really rich, a lot richer than you, is that how miserable all the rich people are. That's what he understood, what frustrated lives they're leading. But guess what? It's the not rich also. They're also not. It's just the myth that you become happy if you have more money, that's all. Some people are unhappy with money, and some people are unhappy without money. Actually, I remember once I was just coming in an overnight train coming into Hyderabad, and as is common in India, you see people, they come in from the village, they have no money, no place to stay, and they build some kind of what in English would be called a slum residence or jhopar on the railway land. It's government land. It's kind of, anyone can go there. So it's all the poor people and all the homeless people, they make their homes. And I just saw coming in all these people getting up in the morning, and I just noted how much more anxiety-free they seem than the average people. They have nothing. Not that we're saying everyone should be poverty-stricken. Anyway, the Reverend Father is here saying if you're not going to get angry, but well, maybe we should get angry if people are propagating such things as this person is propagating, which I'll go through point by point now, with the aim to turn people into Christians, which we see here in India. The kind of Christianity they're promoting is, although they talk of love, but it's actually a religion of hate, in which and it has been throughout the ages. And the Christianity has, in the name of Christ, it's so much murder and hatred and intolerance. Okay. So the points or the allegations or whatever made by the Reverend Father. He says, when Valmiki wrote Ramayana, he never mentioned Ram as God, he wrote it as a story. It was only Tulsi who established Ram as God in 1800 AD as God in his writing. Well, there are various sections of the Ramayana, the last of which is the Uttarakhand. In the first part of Ramayana, Ram is not directly presented as Vishnu. But in the Uttarakhand, it's very clearly given that the demigods went to Vishnu being harassed by Ravana, and the similar story in many of the avatars, of Krishna avatar also. So that's in there in the Uttarakhand. Now some people some Vaishnavas, they also don't accept Uttarakhand as being part of the original Ramayana. So even if you say that's prakshipt, interpolated, then we find that in all the Puranas, Ram is recognized as Vishnu, in Srimad Bhagavatam, for instance. So, even if Valmiki did not state that Ram is God, it wasn't written just as a story. I mean, it's a given. It's understood. It's not that you have to say all the time, Ram is God, Ram is God, Ram is God. But the sweetness of the Lord's Leela is that even though He is God, He plays in many ways as if an ordinary human being. He's an accessible God. He's not just a God sitting on a cloud chucking people into hell, but He's a God you can live with, talk with, play with, laugh with, eat with, dance with, kiss, and so on. But it wasn't written just as like some story, like people write stories just for time pass or something like this. But the fact that it has been a significant, a highly significant theological guide, or it's been the work of Bhakti for untold generations. This person says Tulsi established Ram as God in 1800 AD as God is in his writing. And this person is extremely misinformed. Tulsi was well before 1800. He passed away in Anno Domini in the Gregorian year 1623. So we can just see how badly informed this person is. Unfortunately, the person who he's victimizing with these allegations seems to be similarly badly informed, and he couldn't tell him that the understanding of Ram as Bhagavan has not been just for the last 200-300 years, but it's been a cornerstone of Vishnu Bhakti since time immemorial. In fact, it's been a sophisticated devotional system long before Christ. Ram was being worshipped, Krishna was being worshipped, Vishnu, Narasimha, Shiva, they were all being worshipped. So, the priest goes on to say, there are more than 2,000 versions of Ramayana. Which one are we talking about? Well, he says here there are 2,000 versions. I don't know where he got this figure from. It may be another of his misstatements, like 1800, Tulsidas. The famous editions of Ramayana are Valmiki in Sanskrit, and later in vernacular languages. What's called Ramayana in North India is the Ramcharitmanas of Tulsidas, which is said to be in Hindi. It's Audhi, which is nowadays considered a dialect of Hindi. Kritivas Ramayana in Bengal, which appears to, it's not very well known in Bengal. Rama Bhakti was never very big in Bengal. It was the form of Vishnu worship in Bengal is, since the time of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when in that era when the bhakti movements were coming up all over India and the translations of Shastra were being put in the vernacular languages. So Kritivas put the Ramayana into Bengali, but with the influence of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his followers in Bengal, the worship of Radha Krishna became very strong there, not Rama. In Tamil Nadu, in the Tamil language, the Kamban Ramayana is very strong. In Telugu, who's the author of the Ramayana in Telugu? Anyone? We have so many Telugu. Narayan Krishnamurti. When did he make that in Telugu? No, there's a traditional one. It's called Mula Anyway, Mula Ramayana. Well, that's one thing I was going to say, is that the Valmiki Ramayana is considered by all like the original one, but according to Madhva, which is very much Madhvacharya, he gives the understanding, which is very much in line with the Vedic tradition, that there is a Mool Ramayana, which is like the Veda, like Shruti, which eternally exists, from which Valmiki was inspired. He drew down he manifested Ramayana as we have it now. In Telugu, in Oriya, there's also some edition of Ramayana, but again, in Oriya, the main Vishnu worship Rama worship is more than in Bengal probably, but the main worship there is of Krishna. So that's that. In Gujarati, I don't think there's any edition of Rama. The Ramcharitmanas is the popular rendition of in Gujarat, even though it's not in Gujarati. Marathi, I don't know. So there's also a Jain edition of Ramayana, which is quite, strange, you could say. There are Buddhist editions, and there are editions in Thai Ramkhengheng, in which they change it and make Ravana abducts Sita, and it's like some kind of love affair between Ravana and Sita. Completely change the whole story. And in Bahasa Indonesia, so there are a few different editions. I know about 2,000. I don't know where the figure came from. But that there are various editions doesn't undermine the authenticity of Ramayana. It just shows that the story of Rama has been inspirational to so many people who have presented Ram Leela according to their inspiration and according to their appreciation. So there may be 2,000. If you're talking about 2,000 manuscripts, that's quite possible. Now, by asking this question, which one are we talking about, versions of the Ramayana, you're really setting yourself up there for the question, when you talk about the Bible, which Bible are we talking about? Well, the first question is, what is the Bible? It's, the Bible is the Old Testament, which is put together some ancient writings of the Jewish people, which were put together. And then, after that was added, the Christians added what they call the New Testament, which consists of the life of Christ in 4 Gospels, none of which concur on all points. Well, Matthew, Mark and Luke are fairly similar, but it's in John where there's all kinds of things which are very different to the other 3 Gospels. And it's in John that you have who wrote, it seems all of them wrote after Christ left or went away or whatever. John seems to be the latest, about 100 years after or the birth of Christ. And there are all kinds of things in John which, like the famous statement, "I am the way, the truth and the life, no one comes to God but through me." That's in John. It's supposed to be like a crucial statement, but none of the earlier biographers of Jesus wrote that. I and the Father are one. There are all kinds of things. So, and then there's a whole bunch of stuff about Saint Paul who redefined Christianity, you could say. Some scholars call Christianity Paulianity because what he said became the shape for the church more than what Christ said, according to many scholars, if you hear one. So they're the Acts of the Apostles and John's letters, but and there are various books. The last book in the Bible, in most Bibles, is when I say most Bibles, I mean because there are different versions of the Bible, and some churches some books are considered apocryphal. There's called the Apocrypha. There are so many different books prior to Jesus, after Jesus, that were written by various mystics, and then some of them were accepted and some of them were not by various Christians or whatever. And so different churches, they have more books, and other churches, they have less books. Protestants accept some that the Christians don't, and vice versa. So first of all, what is the Bible? Which Bible? It's a put-together collection of writings. Jesus himself spoke. It's generally accepted that he spoke in a dialect of Aramaic. Of course, everything was a dialect in those days. There were no fixed standard languages, except Sanskrit. It was written later in Greek, then came into Latin and English, and actually before English it came into German, and then English, and then Dutch and French, and now so many languages it's translated in. There were problems when the translators were translating they want to put it into English. This would have been in the early 17th century. There are problems. They try to do it from the original Greek, but they found that many times the Greek words, they didn't know what it meant, because they didn't find any other usage of the Greek word anywhere else except in the Bible, and they didn't know what it meant. So from the beginning there were problems, and of course different translators had different ideas of what the words meant, and therefore there's some of the words were deliberately changed. The Catholic Bible, Douay Rheims, that was in 1609. That was in Latin. And then on the basis of that, there were various editions. And so the Catholic, in the 20th century, many different editions of the Bible were made with the idea of modernizing the language, correcting mistakes. The king, The King James Bible in 1611 became the King James Version, became the standard edition for Protestants throughout the world. That was worked on by various scholars. But in the 20th century there are many revised editions, and the English revised, 19th and 20th century, toward the end of the 19th century, the English revised edition brought out in 1881. In the New Testament there were 30,000 changes from the King James edition, because for various reasons they wanted to modernize the language, make it more easy for people to understand. Many times they found what they thought that the translators of the King James Version had made mistakes, so that people were fighting and dying over different Protestants and Catholics over different theological issues based on mistakes by translators for centuries. This is what was going on. So back to the Catholic version. Then the Knox edition came out in 1945-9. The Confraternity of 1945, the New Testament, and then the Old Testament. Usually they translate the New Testament first because that's more important to Christians, and it's not as big as the Old Testament. Of course, when we say the Bible, the Jews, they have the Bible and they don't accept the New Testament at all. Confraternity edition 1952 and then 1961, and later came the New American Bible in 1970 something. I wrote it down, but it's too small, I can't read it myself. Then the English Revised Edition 1881 of the King James Version, the American Standard Version in 1900 and 1901, that means New Testament, Old Testament. In 1946 and 1952, the Revised Standard Version. Then in British English, because the British they don't like American English, so they brought out their edition, the New English Bible, in 1961 and 1970, and so on. So when you say which Bible, you're asking which Ramayana are we talking about? The question comes back, well, which Bible are we talking about, and what is the Bible anyway? Who wrote? There are so many problems with biblical scholarship. Generally it's said that it's generally considered that Moses wrote the Pentateuch, or the first 5 books of the Bible. That's standard Christian belief. But scholarly analysis, whether you believe it or not, identifies that this is very unlikely that one person wrote it, because it's written in different styles, the different parts of it contradict each other, and so on. So according to the scholarly community, it was not written by one person, but by several persons, or at different periods of time. Then the next point by the Reverend is that if this Varna system is true, then why didn't India become the world's largest economy, or is the perfect model in governmental structure? Now this question seems to be there's some kind of email exchange going on between. So I don't know exactly what's been discussed before, so it's a little difficult for me to answer because I'm not in on the discussion. But basically we can say that the caste system in India has been very widely reviled all over the world because of its hierarchical structure, in which people are from birth allotted different roles with no possibility to change that. The original Varna system, Varnashram system, is not so rigid, and it recognizes that different people have different abilities and inclinations, and that people should be trained and engaged according to their ability and inclination. We see that within society there are different kinds of people. Some people are very intellectually inclined. Some people are natural leaders. We don't find so many natural leaders nowadays because the whole society is set up in such a way to make everyone a dumb follower. The education system and everything. We find some people who are naturally, their inclination is toward business and making money. And we find some people who are naturally inclined to arts, or they're not particularly, although there is this idea in modern psychology that everyone has potential and everyone can do wonderful things, but the actual fact is, as we see, is that most people are just ordinary people who don't care that much about doing something great in the world, and they just want to do some work and eat and sleep and go on with their life. So the Vedic social system recognizes this, that different people have different abilities and inclinations, and they should be trained accordingly. And we find from the ancient literature that it wasn't so rigid that by birth one is forced to remain within a particular caste. This came up later. That is a corruption of the original system. The original system is more realistic and practical than, in many ways, than the modern social system, in which everyone has a uniform education, even though most of the things that people learn have no bearing whatsoever on what they study, has no bearing on what they do with the rest of their life afterward. Whereas, for instance, if a potter's son from a young age learns how to make pots, then he has a fixed profession for his whole life, and he doesn't have to study what's the economic system of Japan or any such thing. He doesn't need to, and why fill your head with so many things which are of no use to you? Rather, the society was based on that people would everyone would learn in Vedic culture, maybe not by reading and writing, but they would learn about Ramayana, for instance. They would hear that regularly. The question, why didn't India become the world's largest economy? Well, there was no attempt to become the world's largest economy in traditional culture because it was a completely different concept of life. The idea that our Christian friend or not friend here is proposing is that India should have become the world's largest economy, but that's a completely materialistic idea. The idea in Vedic culture is there's dharma, artha, kama, moksha. Dharma means ritualistic. Well, it's a very big word. Dharma means, for want of a better term, religious activities. It's sometimes translated as that, although it has a much broader and deeper understanding than the word religion in English. Artha means activities for economic activities. Kama means fulfillment of desire and fulfillment of desire according to dharma, not animalistically. And moksha means release from the cycle of birth and death, salvation. And above and beyond that, the Vedic culture aims at bhakti, or love of God. So the Vedic culture was not one of developing the economy as the goal of human society, but to live yavad artha prayojanam, to produce what is needed according to our need which is food. The basic needs are food, clothing, shelter, protection. That's why one varna or one section of human society are trained as kshatriyas to protect others. And but the emphasis was not on economic development, but on spiritual development. This idea that the priest is promoting, that if India's religion and culture was actually so good, then India should have been the best country in the world, the most developed economy. But Jesus, he didn't teach that. That was taught later by Christians. But Jesus, he was a renunciant. He lived in poverty. He preached that you cannot love God and love mammon. Mammon means materialistic enjoyment and materialistic development. But later Christians, so-called Christians, twisted his message, and especially the Protestant ethic is said to be that, well, the sign that God loves you if you have a lot of money. It was just the opposite to Jesus, who told the fisherman, leave everything and come and join me. Now, the idea that you have to develop the economy, the idea of just expanding the economy and developing more and more and more, this has produced so much instability and unrest all over the world. The modern economic system is to expand and expand and expand with collapse is inevitable, and exploitation is inevitable. Exploitation of the earth, exploitation of the poor. So it's not that this priest is in some big illusion that most people in the world are in the same illusion, that we have to develop the economy and that's a sign of progress. And he's in a bigger illusion by saying that it was Christianity that is behind the economic development that's going on, that has changed the face of the world. I'll get back to that later. Why didn't the Industrial Revolution start from India, or why didn't all the best inventions and technology originate from India? Well, actually, there was very highly advanced technology in India, which is lost now for various reasons. I mean, the Muslims, invaders, they destroyed much of the libraries and killed so many Brahmins. But even now in Delhi, there's this Dhruva Stamba, which has been renamed by Muslims as Qutub Minar, which is an pure iron pillar which stands without any support, which doesn't fall over, and which is from pure iron which doesn't rust. Nowadays we have stainless steel with an admixture of carbon. The iron doesn't rust, but according to theoretical chemistry, if iron is completely pure, it won't rust. And the Dhruva Stamba is of such pure iron, but no one nowadays knows how to make such things. Why didn't so there are so many things. We find in ancient India, not only in India, all over the world, there was great technology which nowadays people have no idea of. In India, we find the temples built with massive stones, which people nowadays they wouldn't know how to even now it would be difficult to transport such huge stones. So they don't know how those temples were built. In the pyramids of Egypt, no one knows how they were built, with huge stones which are placed together so perfectly without anything in between them that they're still standing after thousands of years. And what's more, it's been found that the placement of the pyramids is not just arbitrary, but they have astronomical significance. That they're placed in such ways that they align with the various asterisms of the stars during key astronomical periods such as the solstice and the equinox. In Stonehenge in England is also like that. No one knows how the ancients could have done such things and to be so accurate and precise in their the pyramids, Stonehenge. They are seen to be have to have significance in astronomy, although it's not known how people in ancient times could have had it, because according to Christian mythology, all knowledge has come out of the West in the last few hundred years. But clearly this is not true. Clearly there was, all over the world, advanced civilization. But what happened is that when the Christians, they came to power in Europe, or wherever they went, they just eliminated all traces of previous civilizations. So we find, even now, using ancient Indian astronomical systems, you can predict the sunrise in any part of the world, or the sunset, moon. So they had advanced astronomical knowledge, which means advanced mathematical knowledge. It's not that it was all developed in the last few hundred years. That is the myth that's going on. This propaganda, lies that are going on, is that all the knowledge of human society has come up in the last few hundred years from Europe and from the Western people. So he goes on to say, the priest says, we all follow the Westerners in everything: the car we drive, the clothing we wear. Yeah, the clothing we wear, like in the Western world. You really want the young women of India will wear mini skirts? That's all coming out of the Christian world. If you're equating Christianity with Western culture, then why don't you see? It's not all good. The knowledge of medicine, again in ancient India there was sophisticated knowledge of medicine, which is still going on today. Much of it was lost, but still much of it is going on. The software, well, for your information, much of the software in the world is written by Indians. Computers, telecommunications, television, internet, etc. This person thinks that this is advancement of civilization, to have television. The flights we fly in, the refrigerators we use. Well, for your information, Mr. Priest, we here don't use refrigerators. We prefer to have fresh food. Refrigerator means no fresh food. But God gave fresh food that you can cook immediately, offer to Him. If there's any left over, distribute it among others, and cook again the next time. Why keep rotten food in your fridge? The fridge is not an advancement it's not an advantage to human society. Next point. The idea, we follow the Westerners in everything. Yes, Indians are also following. By following the Westerners, and the more the Western mode of civilization is introduced into India, the more degraded it becomes. Because Western civilization, it's not that Western so-called civilization is so wonderful, everything about it is so wonderful. Christianity hasn't brought about any ideal society in the Western world. The long this in Ireland for hundreds of years there's been conflict between Protestants and Catholics, which is, in Britain supposed to be the pinnacle of civilization according to the British. They've exported this idea all over the world. In Britain, yes, Northern Ireland is part of Britain. Catholics and Protestants in the last few decades have been fighting each other. And it's not that Christianity, and what is it? They're fighting over Christianity. It's not that Christianity has solved the problem, it's the very cause of the problem. Germany, where Protestantism arose, and still there are Protestants and Catholics in different parts of Germany. And most people don't give it. Nowadays people don't give a damn about. The present Pope is from Germany, but most Germans don't give a damn about him. So, that's where Nazism arose. That's also one of the great Western contributions to civilization, Nazism. In South Africa, the Dutch Reformed Church was right behind the apartheid, with all its oppression and cruelty. The evangelical Christianity in the southern United States that's like the main Christian area. It's called the Bible Belt, the southern part of the USA. That's the most racialistic part of the country. And even though segregation of blacks and whites, which only came about in the first of all, the blacks were slaves. That was another. Christians, they organized the slave industry on which America's economy came up. Taking support from the Bible, because St. Paul, we find in the New Testament, he also supported slavery. It's there in Paul's writings. He says, treat your slaves well. So he supported it, and Christians, they said, see, slaves, so it's okay. St. Paul approved of it. Saint Paul. And, so the blacks in America, they are there because the local Indians, as the Western people, or the Europeans who came to America wrongly called the people who are living in America, Indians, they were largely annihilated. They're just like killed. Because they didn't make very good slaves, and then the Christians saw, well, what's the use of keeping them alive? They just killed most of them, that's all. Took over their lands. So they found that Africans, they made better slaves, so they packed them into ships. And those who survived the voyage from Africa to America, and then for the privilege of surviving, they became slaves. And they became, naturally, they selected the strongest Africans that they could capture, and then the ones that survived were the strongest, so naturally they became a physically very healthy people, and they were kept as slaves. So slavery was abolished in America, but eventually, although many Christians opposed the abolition of slavery, but the apartheid continued. Blacks were still considered second-class citizens, and even today in the Bible Belt, on Sunday when everyone goes to church, they don't go to church on other days, hardly. Well, the blacks have their churches and the whites have their churches. So it's not that it's all so wonderful in the West. So all kinds of things are coming. You want society to be like in the West. You think that's the dream, the great, the example to follow. Well, we find as Westernization comes into India more and more, there's more immorality, divorce, drunkenness. There was no divorce among Hindus until Western-educated Nehru introduced it in 1955. So it's not that the West is so wonderful. Yeah. So yeah, we do use all these things like fridges. Well, we don't use fridges, cars, and all these kind of things. But actually, we in the Krishna conscious movement who follow Srila Prabhupada, we are much closer to Jesus in advocating a simple way of life without luxury. That's actually how Jesus lived. Why are you saying that Christianity is better because it's produced motor cars and internet and television? Jesus, he wasn't an advocate of living a luxurious life. You're not following Jesus. We're following Jesus better than you are. You're so much concerned with all this material advancement. That wasn't Jesus' concern at all. So even to abolish human sacrifice and the sati system, a Western Christian missionary had to raise his voice and escalate it to the Queen of England to ban it. Which Christian missionary? And why would he bring it to the Queen of England who has no power? She is only a constitutional monarch. I mean, some very strange things are written here. Now, it is true that there was human sacrifice in India. It wasn't like going on in every street corner. It wasn't a very common thing, but certain low-class people used to do that, or even some kings might do it. Some people who are set for capital punishment, which still goes on in many Christian countries. They would. So that was going on. That's true. There's a note I meant for that. But it's not that human sacrifice was like central to Vedic culture. Rather, the highest class people, they wouldn't kill even a fly. Ahimsa was promoted, non-violence to all living beings. That was the culture that was widely promoted. Whereas in Christianity, they even today, it's considered just normal for Christians to eat slaughterhouse meat. They don't think of the suffering that's given to so many animals which are killed and tortured throughout their lives. In fact, Christianity, many people in the widespread ecological movement, they see that Christianity, the philosophy of Christianity, that this world is, God gave us this world for our enjoyment, which this priest is saying, and therefore saying that Christianity is better because the Christians have developed so many things. That the Christians, is this philosophy, this idea that we can just take the earth and spoil it in any way we like, that is responsible for the massive ecological imbalance and the tremendous ecological disaster all over the world, which people in India don't seem to be much aware of, but certainly in the West, people are very much aware of it, that there are serious ecological problems caused by man's desire to exploit and control nature, which comes from science, but or through the medium of science and technology, but it's fueled by the underlying Christian understanding that God gave the world for us to enjoy, and that we are to, the animals are there for us to kill. That's a Christian understanding. Whereas the Hindu understanding is that these are all creatures of God. And if there is killing, only as necessary. Human sacrifice, that was done by tantrics, actually, who are outside the Vedic culture. They were not considered proper or high class or any such thing. It certainly wasn't central to the what we could call the Vedic religion. But killing has been and is up to the present day central to Christian culture. I mean, recently there we go, there's the advantage of motor vehicles. Pollution, noise pollution. The previous president of America, deliberately lying, who declares himself to be a very strong Christian. He got voted in with the Christian vote. Making lies about Iraq they're having discovered, and in Britain also, who declared himself a Christian. The Prime Minister, together they invaded Iraq. Both knew that it was a lie, they said that weapons of mass destruction had been discovered in Iraq, which was not true, but they lied, and on the strength of their lies they killed maybe hundreds of thousands of Iraqi people, and of their own people also, and spending the money of their people who worked hard, what for? Well, for oil. Not for love of Christ. But these are the people who call themselves Christians. And you want to be like a Christian? So, the number of the British, they stopped the human sacrifice, which is probably exaggerated. But then the number of people they killed in India was far, the Christians killed, far outnumbered those who they might have saved from human sacrifice and sati. Sati, also original, was a voluntary act with the understanding that at death the wife follows the husband to wherever he goes. Later it became forced by the influence of Kali Yuga, in which everything declines. It became forced in many cases, and it was good that it was stopped. But the Christians, in their domination of India, they killed so many people, just like at Jallianwala Bagh. Have you heard of that? That's taught in the schools in India. That's in Amritsar in 1911. A group of Indians came together without any weapons to protest against some measures that the British were enacting, and the British soldiers fired on them. They were unarmed. Officially 329 people were killed. There were probably a lot more killed. The person who ordered the firing was tried and convicted, but it was appealed and that was overturned, and he was considered a hero in Britain. So, yes, we're talking about the moral superiority of Christians and how everything is better due to the Christians. Now, another point, a very important point, is that you're saying that, all this airplanes, technology, industry, medicine, all this has been developed by Christians. But actually, all this, the development of science, came not out of Christianity, but out of the Renaissance, humanism, and the Enlightenment. This is the history of Europe, which is well known to anyone who takes the trouble to study it. And certainly someone who calls himself a Christian priest should know these things. That the development of science in the Western world came about in protest to the Christian worldview. Copernicus and Galileo, they proposed from their looking through telescopes, they proposed that the geocentric vision of the universe, in which the earth is at the center, which was the general understanding, supposed to be supported by the Bible, and definitely according to the church, that was inaccurate. And that our solar system, of course they didn't know so much about the wider universe at that time, but that the solar system, it's a solar system, it's not an earthly system. It goes around the sun. Galileo was fortunate enough not to become a victim of the Inquisition. He was not allowed. The Inquisition tortured and killed people who dared to say such things. He was quite old when he deliberately didn't reveal all this stuff until he was old, and anyway he died before they could murder him in the name of Christ. So science developed in opposition to Christianity, not as a result of Christianity. It's just the opposite. And in the Western world there's still largely a tension between science and Christianity, which never happened in the Vedic world, because the Vedic texts, they were of metallurgy and astronomy and mathematics. When we're talking about astronomy, I mean, in astronomy, obviously there is developed to even have a science of astronomy, as was there in the ancient Indian world, means they had to have a very developed knowledge of mathematics. It wasn't that sines and cosines and tangents and all this kind of stuff was invented by Greeks, but well prior to that, all these things were known in Vedic India. So the whole idea that all this development has come out because of Christianity is total hogwash. It's in spite of and in opposition to Christianity. The whole idea of Darwinian evolution, Darwin's idea of evolution, that is like a major point of contention between evangelical Christians and those who subscribe to the Darwinian evolution. The Catholic Church capitulated to Darwinian theory, and they think that Darwin's theory is okay. They kind of capitulated and say, okay, we accept what science says. But that doesn't make the scientists any more inclined towards Catholicism or Christianity, because in their understanding, you don't need God. And in the Catholic understanding, I don't know if it's fully enunciated what their latest speculation on this is. In their understanding, God's the creator, he just kind of chucked in the ingredients or something, and then later it all evolved, or who knows what idea. But anyway, the idea that Christianity is the cause of your being able to watch cartoons on television is totally misinformed. Okay, it's just past 8 o'clock, and I'll continue this, Krishna willing, the day after tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll speak on Vishnu Sahasranam, Krishna willing, and we'll get back to this later on. Should finish it in the next section. Yeah, well, let me finish the whole thing. Unless let's see what the question is, and then see if I'll answer it now or later.
There's a book called Jesus Lived in India.
There's a book called Jesus Lived in India. There are many such books. He may have learned things in India. One thing in the Bible, between the age of 12 and 30, there's not one word written about Jesus. It describes his birth, then up to the age 12, and then nothing whatsoever up till the age 30. So some people speculate that he went to India, and some people speculate that after his resurrection from the dead or whatever it was, he also went to India. So it may be. It may be. Now, you see, the Hindus used to say that Jesus came to India and learned everything that he learned from India. But now the Christians are saying that actually, you see, and they turn it around and somehow or other say that, you see, Jesus is an Indian or something like that. I don't know. They can tell any lies. Really. They don't, for the purpose of conversion, it's not that they're searching for the truth or want to get the truth, but their whole system, the strategy or policy is just convert people by any means whatsoever. I mean, it's a conversion business in India. There's millions of dollars being poured into India to convert, and people get converted because they get given money and chickens on Sunday, bag of rice and chickens on Sunday, poor chickens, and the people they get paid to convert others. For every documented conversion, that means they have to be baptized, they have to burn pictures of Hindu gods just to prove that they're really converted. They have to eat beef, and then the person who converts them gets 10,000 rupees or whatever. So it's a big business. It's not like out of religious conviction that these conversions are going on. It's horrible. Yeah, lies, all kinds of lies. Just like the Catholic Church, this idea that St. Thomas came to India, one of the original apostles, and he was killed by Brahmins. I mean, that myth is being promoted to make people feel anti-Brahmin and pro-Christian, although Brahmins, they wouldn't kill. And traditionally they would not kill even flies. The Kshatriyas they would kill. But the Catholic Church, until recently, they denied that St. Thomas, they said that they didn't recognize that he even came to India. But now, they recognize. It's good for them. So, there are so many things. This saint, what's his name? Saint, what's his name? One Saint Francis in Goa, not Assisi. Francis Xavier, he's another saint, the one who brought Christianity to Goa. So also, by killing so many people, you either get killed or accept Christianity. They made conversions. There were Christians from long before, further south in Kerala. They were connected with the Syrian church. So they became happy to know that some Christians have come. So, but when they came and met the Christians who had come from Europe, they were subject to the Inquisition. That means they were tortured to death because they were Christians, but they were told you have to believe in the Pope, but they never heard of any Pope. So they came to meet the Christians, happy to meet them, and as a result they got tortured to death. I mean, these are the kind of saints. And of course not all the saints are like that, but I mean, it's not such a rosy picture as is painted. And because I've been confronted here with some propaganda, I'm not even trying to give a balanced perspective. I'm pointing out some of the, it's not just a one-sided story. When I finish, I'll come to that point of why all the criticism. Okay, Hare Krishna. Christian Brahmin Seva Samiti. So many things. No, well, that happens. So many people, they get converted to Christians or Muslims in India, and they're supposed to be like all the same, all brothers, but the Brahmins, they remain, who get converted, they'll only marry among Christian Brahmins. Even now, up to the present day. They retain their caste status, but you see, we're Christian Brahmins, so we only marry other Christian Brahmins. It's not that the caste system breaks down by being converted to Christianity or Islam.
In south part of Tamil Nadu, mostly this caste system exists. There's churches like Nada Church, Deva Church.
They have different churches, yeah, in Tamil Nadu for different castes. So it's not that you get free from casteism by being converted. Casteism is an evil, no doubt, which is not supported by the original Vedic culture. But Christianity is not the solution to that, and that's proven by the casteism of Christians in India, which is continued for hundreds of years. Okay. Hare Krishna. All glories to Lord Sri Krishna.
Telling they're wearing saris for Mary. Mother Mary, they're putting the saris.
Yeah, they put Mother Mary, yeah.
Indians feel very nice. That's why they...
And they started Padayatra, putting malas, like Ayappas.
All imitation. We should have a center in Velankani and do regular preaching there.
In that part, Varangani and Nagapatnam, that side, there is like a Saiva philosophy, they are strong. So now the chanting of the mantra from the Christian itself, it comes from Saivist.
They have so many things. They say that Sanskrit was invented by Saint Thomas, and Tamil was invented by Saint Thomas, all kinds of bogus things. In Tamil they call the Bible the Veda. Just cheating. In Telugu also? Just cheating. Just cheating. Beginning to end cheating. If their thing is so good, then just present it. Why do you pretend that it's... by dressing Mother Mary in a sari and doing puja. It's the Catholics who do that. The Protestants don't do that. They have a completely different approach. If you go in a Protestant... We stopped one time to take prasadam. We were driving from some place to... I think we were driving to... can't remember, to Sri Rangam or something. We stopped on the side of the road, and it happened to be a Christian church, but we couldn't tell because from outside it looked the same. And inside it was completely bare, no pictures, nothing. That was Protestant. We stopped to take prasadam there. So in the Protestants, the extreme Protestant, but they don't have any pictures, they don't have crucifixes, they have no pictures and no saints. It's very different in many ways to Catholicism. The Orthodox Church is closer to Catholicism. They have icons and saints and all this kind of thing, and a hierarchical church structure, which Protestants also, some of them have a church structure, but it's not. They have very different understanding. Anyway, Hare Krishna. There's a very interesting article by Ravindra Swarup Prabhu in one old Back to Godhead called "How I Was Saved from Being Saved." How they get all the young kids in the church, and they give them a long lecture, and they tell you that you're going to die, you're going to go to hell, you're going to be burned in hell forever, and think of all the sins you've done. And then everyone starts thinking, I beat my little brother, I lied, I stole some cake, and you get all the sins that you have to think of. All that you're going to have to burn in hell, but Jesus will save you. Come forward, be born again. And then anyone going to do it? And one boy walks up and they play the organ, and with all this music which makes you feel saved. And then another one goes, and another one goes, and Ravindra Swarup in his childhood had enough sense not to go. He was saved from being saved.
Mostly in the spot, they're promoting diseases curing, mental illness curing, you get good marks.
Yeah, they say you'll get, if you become a Christian, you get good marks. They'll give you a job, not just good marks, they'll give you a job. I wonder if when all the Christian money runs out, are the Christians going to, I guess they'll remain Christians. The idea is just somehow or other bring them in. And then later, even if the new converts, they remain half Hindus, they're not bothered because they want to get the kids and then train them from the beginning in their schools. They have Rath Yatras, all kinds of things, imitating Hindu